we will see how this goes. I probably should have prepared stuff. I probably should have written a bunch of things down and scripted this out a little bit. But if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you know that whenever I do that, they are horrible. So we're not going to do that. This is going to be a stream of consciousness because that is what always works. As the title says, this is for Dan slash Calvin8Hobbs. For those of you not aware, and I'm probably, well, I am. I'm going to post this on Facebook as well. Something I don't think I've ever done with any of my videos, because I just want people to hear all of what I've got to say. Hopefully, I don't drag on for too long, and hopefully, I do a good job of this. But Dan Calvin8Hobbs passed away a few days ago. He is one of the OGs. If you've watched this channel, those of us that have been doing the videos since we kind of came back, the Skype talkers, all of that, he is one of us. And if you've heard us talk about the Discord, if you've heard us plug it, or if you've been on it, even if you haven't interacted, he is a big reason why the Discord exists. We found out a while ago that he was sick, and he just wanted to, kind of touch base with everybody again and start talking wrestling and kind of do all of those things. And so the Discord was a way to do that, and so we did that. And I just wanted to come on here and kind of talk about him and why he is important to me. I'm sure we will do a video with all of us kind of talking about him, but I kind of want to go to old school because he literally was like me. He was around back in 2007, making videos, disagreeing with me, agreeing with me, and he is one of the people who I can say, thanks to YouTube, I can say this: YouTube has changed my life. Not maybe financially, definitely not financially, or made me super famous or anything like that. And I've never wanted that, other than what some people might think. But I've never wanted that. This was more of a way of just me being able to come on somewhere and just empty my head of thoughts, especially about something that I cannot normally talk to people about the way that I like to talk to people about pro wrestling, the weird, wacky world of pro wrestling, in a way that most people would find like really weird that people talk about pro wrestling this way. And it's been able to let me do that, but it is also the people that I have met since being on here. And Dan was one of those people, and I don't know if it was Oliver Scott, or Chase, who got him in with the rest of us. It was probably Oliver. And I doubt he'll see this, but if he does, we still think about you, and I'm glad that you got us together. And then Chase, which we probably don't, probably give enough credit to, without question, is the one that has kept us kind of together. He deserves so much credit, and even back then was the one that kind of weeded people out and got the core of us together and made sure that we were all kind of always talking. And he was the guy that was always bringing people in to be part of kind of the group. And he probably doesn't get nearly enough credit, and I hope he knows that, and I hope he understands that without him, the way that all of this has kind of touched our lives would never have happened, in a lot of ways. And the same thing with Oliver. Oliver was kind of, the one that kind of started it all. But I have met a lot of people. I've met people who I can generally call friends. My very close, my very best friends. They share a lot of the same likes, dislikes as I do, but wrestling is not necessarily one of them. I have a couple of friends, Aaron and Mike, who they like pro wrestling. Mike really likes pro wrestling, but probably not to the degree, and I think they know this, that I do. I like it on a kind of a different level, in a different way than either of them. So me finding people who actually like pro wrestling the same way I do, and I can talk to about pro wrestling the way that I want to talk about pro wrestling, is always such a great thing, and Dan was one of those people. Plus, um, he was one of those people that liked many of the other things, almost everything. Like me and him were very similar, and it's a really weird thing because all of these people that I've met through, and I will concentrate on Dan here in a minute, but I want to set this up so that people kind of understand like his importance to me. I have met so many people that I consider friends. I've met so many people that I have like really good friendships with because we share so many of the same likes. A lot of people know about Markeem. Markeem's a lot younger than me, and yet me and him are literally two peas in a pod. We like so many of the same things, um, see things in a lot of the same way, have attitudes towards things very similar, and Dan even more so than Markeem. And then you have Vic, LV, and it's very hard to explain unless you see me and LV, and we haven't been together for years, but I think people that have seen us together just realize that there's something about me and him that just click. Um, and those are two people who definitely I probably would have never met, never been in my circle, never anything without YouTube. And without me that first time clicking on a video and just spouting wrestling nonsense into a video, into a webcam. And Dan, maybe even more than them. Um, because me and Dan come from very similar backgrounds, saw wrestling very similar ways, saw the world in very similar ways, had many of the same likes. Me and Markeem, we are big geeks in a lot of ways. Me and Dan are probably even more so because we enjoy like Warhammer 40k, little plastic men going around a table pretending that they're doing an intergalactic war, and pro wrestling, and comic books, and video games, and world events, and history, and alternate history, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And I always enjoyed talking to Dan. I always enjoyed just being able to just like go off on things that probably couldn't go off with other people about, either that they didn't understand or they just didn't have the same perspective as me, um, on things. And so I treasured Dan in that way. And even when me and him weren't talking all the time, we always stayed in contact. We always kind of like, I remember when he got married, and that was a big thing, and when he told me that was going to happen, and me and him shared very similar experiences with our families, where some of you know this, I took care of my parents for a pretty good stretch of time. My dad got sick first. He got better. Then my mom got sick, and then she passed away. And then life kind of went on from there. My dad got better, until he passed away, and he passed away literally from the same thing that Dan did, which was cancer. And like I said, we all knew that he'd been sick. I don't think I'm not for sure. I think I kind of maybe knew a little bit more how serious it was and how he was actually doing than some of the other guys. I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that. So, for example, when the election here in the United States happened and we didn't hear from him, I kind of knew something wasn't good. And he had told me that things had not gone good, but I was under the impression that we still had a couple months left and not days. And we ended up only having days. And I really wish I'd been able to tell him goodbye. I wasn't. That kind of sucks. I was never even able to meet Dan. He lives in the UK, live in the United States. He never came over here for any wrestling events, anything like that. But I considered him a very good friend and someone that I was so glad to have known, because, like I said, it's very rare that you find someone you click on almost everything with, and even your closest friends. That's not always the case. There's usually something that you like that they don't, or that they like that you don't, or something like that. Like I said, we never met in person, so there may have been ticks or something else. We may have never even been able to stand each other if we were in person. I don't think that would have been the case, but um, it's weird because, like I said, he took care of his dad. I took care of my parents. He got married late. I got married late. He basically married into an insto family. I married into an insto family. Had very similar opinions when it came to world events and politics and just the way the world was in general, along with all of the other hobbies and other geeky things that we both enjoyed, and we just both just were like that. And um, I can say literally he's the only person I have ever met in my entire life that was like that, and so I'm going to miss him immensely because of that. On top of, he was just a good man. From everything I knew, from everything I could tell, like I said, never was around him in person, um, but I seriously doubt it because every time I ever saw him with anybody, anytime I ever saw him um, where he was with other people, it really didn't seem like he was a bad guy, and he really did seem like a very, very good man. And I really feel for his daughters and his wife and the rest of his family. I can't even imagine how much they're gonna miss him just from how we're gonna miss him. And I'm sure, like I said, we'll do a video where we all kind of talk about Dan, because we all have our thoughts. He was just a good guy, and he was one of the first people that I kind of splintered off with when we would all be on Skype, and me and him would just talk. And he had a friend, I can't remember his friend's name, and we would talk with him, and we would just kind of just shoot the shit and talk about all sorts of stuff. Like, he'd ask questions about the United States, I'd ask questions about over there, just how things really were versus like how they were, like how we thought things were, sort of thing, and how people thought, and like all of those types of things, among all of the geeky 40K stuff, all of the, like, when I found out he lived close to Games Workshop. That's how that came about, as I found out he lived close. He dropped something that he lived in Nottingham, and I was like, oh. And so I said something about Games Workshop, and he's like, oh yeah. And so then we started like talking about it, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the chat was kind of like, what are they talking about? And then we started kind of, our friendship kind of grew from there, because that was something that me and my close friends shared. But when you add that to like pro wrestling, and then you find out like he had a love of history the same way I did, and he had the love of alternate history the same way I did, and just the love of just learning about things and learning about why people thought the way they did. And one of the things, if you ever interacted with Dan, and I think people who probably never had, who got on the Discord when Dan was on there and he would talk, is one of the things, even if he disagreed with you, all that he asked always was respect his opinion. He would respect yours, but he wanted to know why you thought the way you did if you disagreed with him, so that he could at least understand where you were coming from. And I think that's a very relevant thing today, and given kind of the events, where I don't think just from the last week, I think from the last multiple decades, where we have a really bad habit of not listening to what people are saying, no matter how stupid it might be, and trying to see if there's a reason, or they're coming from somewhere that we don't understand. And because if you can do that, and I saw Dan do this more than once, you can connect with somebody and they will understand your side even better, and you might even be able to change their opinion, and you might be able to educate them a little bit, and you might be able to get them to understand why what they thought was right wasn't right. And I think that's something that everyone needs to hear right now, and Dan was one of those few people who could do that, and it's sorely missed. There's not very many people out there, even in just day-to-day life, that I think do that enough. We're all laser focused on certain things, and we can't get past those, unfortunately. and Dan was not one of those people. At least that I ever saw, and he's going to be very missed for that too. Among just him being him being his witty, wisecracking self he was with us all the time, and it was always funny because Chase would always get mad at me because I never called him Dan for a very long time, even though everyone does that. I always called him Calvin because he was Calvin8Hobbs, and Dan was always like, whatever. And then when I finally started calling him Dan, he was like, "It's weird here. You call me Dan," and I was like, "All right." But yeah, I'm gonna miss him very much. When I found out he passed away, it hit me really hard, and I'm not one of those people that death just like hits really hard. Not I don't want I don't want to say I'm cold because it's not that. It's just especially if it's expected. Usually I've already kind of dealt with it in my own way, and so it just doesn't hit me as hard. Um, very very few times in my life have I had like an unexpected death. Um, those hit me hard. An expected death usually doesn't. I've usually kind of come to peace with it. Um, but everyone deals with death in a different way. And one of the things that is very clear to me looking back on it is, Dan looked it in the eye and was like, "It is what it is. Let's go." And the last time I talked to him, I would never have guessed that apparently he was as sick as he was, even though he would tell us he was in and out of the hospital. Things weren't looking good. Like I said, I thought we still had months. We had plans, just made plans actually, for him to come on and do a video with all of us, and kind of really connect in a way that hadn't, because Dan didn't necessarily agree with us on a lot of stuff, and he would have been a good counterpoint to a lot of our stuff, and a good a voice that would be different than us just being an echo chamber. And love all of you not being able to hear that, is kind of a shame, beyond just a lasting memory of his. And I was really hoping we were going to be able to do that, and we weren't. Um, I saw Markeem say something about cherish the people that you love and tell them you love them. I really wish I'd been able to say goodbye to Dan. He really, really meant a lot to me. He was one of the few people, and I don't mean this. This is gonna sound bad, but he's one of the few people on here I really, really, really considered a very close friend. And like I said, even when me and him weren't talking all the time, we were always reaching out to each other. We're always making sure each other was doing okay. We just had a connection that was very different than probably just about everybody else that on here, with maybe the exception of Markeem, that I have. And it meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me to find somebody else out in the world, even if he was on the other side of the Atlantic, that at least was very much me, and I wasn't, not that we're alone in the world, but I wasn't so unique that I would never find anyone that saw a lot of the things that I did, and enjoyed everything that I enjoyed, and saw so much of the world that's very similar to the way I saw in the world. Um, that meant a lot to me. It always did. Like I said, YouTube in many ways has enriched my life in that way, and the people I've met. It can never be understated. And losing Dan, really just made me realize that a lot more, because a lot of the way I see the world, especially outside the United States, has a lot to do with just talking to him, and throwing ideas off of him, and I'm gonna miss that. I'm gonna miss him entirely, and I can't even imagine the people that knew him in their day-to-day lives, how much they are gonna miss them. And I hope they all know that we absolutely, pour our heart out, and from everything Dan ever told me, His wife, his daughters were just as strong as he was through all of this, and we're right there with him. And trust me when I say this, we as people who could not be there and were not there and were limited in how we could interact with Dan means the world to us. And I want to thank his wife for reaching out. And I know Dan probably had already kind of set this up, but reaching out and letting us know meant a lot. And and like I said, we'll do a video talking about this. Um, we'll miss him. I will miss him dearly. He was one of the good ones. Gone way too soon. Even though he was closer to my age than anyone else, that's one of the reasons why we were able to I think connect the way we were, as we lived through many of the same things. And a lot of what shapes your life often is your experience. And we experienced many of the same things. And I'm gonna miss him so much. And I hope he knew how much we all loved him, how important he was to all of us. And I hope he's hearing this now and understanding that. So gonna miss him. Like I said, this is for Dan. When we do a video again, we'll definitely talk about Dan, and it'll definitely be kind of a tribute to Dan. But I definitely just wanted to come on here and say that, because he's very important to me. And I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts on him. So that I'm out. Thank you guys very much. Later.